So we are a little over a quarter into this 2025 NBA season, and just like every year, we're seeing a lot of guys who are not in ideal situations. Whether it's a good player wasting his time on a rebuilding roster, a guy who's not getting the playing time he deserves, or simply both parties just need a fresh start moving forward. So in today's video, I want to talk about some guys who I believe should be traded before the trade deadline this season. Now, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. If you like these kinds of videos, make sure to drop a like on the video. It helps the channel a lot, so appreciate you guys for being here. But anyways, diving right into things, the first guy I want to talk about on the trade block is Anfernee Davis, a guy who we've been hearing a lot of noise about. A lot of trade rumors have been circulating regarding Anfernee Davis. Now, clearly the Dallas Mavericks are not having the season they wanted to have, and it's looking like they're going to have to make a hard pivot on this roster moving forward. And the biggest decision they have to make is what they plan on doing with 32-year-old Anfernee Davis moving forward. Now, AD was obviously acquired as a part of the historic Luka Doncic to LA trade. And since his time with the Mavericks, they have been well below a 500 team. And that is also with Anfernee Davis missing more than half of the games since he's been on the roster. And I really think at this point, Dallas has gone all in on Cooper Flagg and his development, and the team is going to be centered around Cooper Flagg. So that leads me to believe that a 32-year-old Anfernee Davis is not the highest of their priorities to hold on to long term. Now, AD is averaging around 20 points and 12 rebounds a night and still looks like he can play that lead role for a team. It just comes with a lot of questioning regarding Anfernee Davis's availability. And like I said, a team's willingness to use Anfernee Davis as one of their main players moving forward, especially in this tail end of his career. In the media, we've heard a bunch lately regarding this Mavericks organization wanting to blow things up, and some potential landing destinations I could see for AD could include the Detroit Pistons, Atlanta Hawks, the Toronto Raptors. I could definitely see one of these teams picking up AD for less than what you'd expect, just because I personally think AD's value is not exactly the highest it's ever been in his career. However, one player whose value has to be extremely high right now is Giannis Antetokounmpo with the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, we are about 3 years into the trade rumors surrounding Giannis, but I will say for the first time, it feels like these rumors are somewhat true. I feel like the Bucks could finally move on from Giannis, whether that is at the trade deadline this year or if it's in the upcoming offseason. Now, unfortunately, this Milwaukee roster is just not good enough of a supporting cast alongside Giannis Antetokounmpo to help this team compete for a championship anytime soon. And I think it's in the best interest of both parties to part ways with Giannis while his value is still probably top 5 in the NBA, and just allow the rebuild to happen in Milwaukee. It kind of seems like the Bucks have been stuck in this cycle of constantly trying to retool this roster since their 2021 championship, and there just hasn't been a lot of success in doing that. So I believe it has finally become time for a fresh restart for Giannis and the Bucks. I would love to see Giannis back on a contending team, really maximizing the most of his prime window. I would love to see Giannis on a contending team alongside another star, dare I say, Donovan Mitchell. I don't know, it's really hard to say what this trade exactly would look like. As I've discussed a lot on this channel, the second apron and first apron restrictions really restricts teams on making trades that can benefit them, and in turn, that just limits the availability of trades to be made. Often nowadays we're seeing 3-team deals being done, so it's really hard to speculate what exactly I could see Giannis going for in the open market. But Giannis is arguably still a top 3 or 4 player in the NBA, and I could imagine that the return Milwaukee could get from trading him probably involves a high-end player and a few first-round picks, if I had to guess. So I'm very interested to observe what we see moving closer towards the trade deadline, what Milwaukee will do with Giannis, if they plan to hold on to him for the rest of the season. Obviously, they're not just going to sell him for a bag of chips. Giannis is basically this Milwaukee franchise as a whole, so I will be interested to see what happens regarding Giannis in the near future. And the next player I want to talk about is Anfernee Simons, who is currently with the Boston Celtics. Now, Simons was acquired this offseason from Portland in exchange for Drew Holiday, which was a move that saved Boston a little bit financially, but also gave them some youth and explosive scoring off of their bench. Some scoring that would be much needed in the absence of Jason Tatum. However, this transition into Joe Mazzulla's system for Anfernee Simons has been a bit underwhelming. He's essentially played that 6-man role for the Celtics and is currently averaging 13.5 points per game on only 24 minutes a night. So his usage and points per game are way down from what they were in Portland. And I personally just don't see the fit for Simons in Boston. I think Joe Mazzulla is a coach that wants gritty players. He has a certain play style that he kind of adapts all of his players towards, and I just don't see Anfernee Simons filling that role too well in Boston. I think Simons plays more of a free style of basketball and can be very isolation heavy and also lacks a little bit defensively, and this just isn't the type of player Joe Mazzulla wants on his team. So I would not be surprised at all to see Anfernee Simons get moved this season, especially since the Celtics are doing pretty well as a team this year without Jason Tatum. They are currently sitting at 15-9, which is good for third place in the Eastern Conference, and I believe they could get some decent value in return for Anfernee Simons, who is on an expiring contract. I think the Celtics could really capitalize off of moving Simons for a player who could really fit that scheme long term, especially once Jason Tatum is back with the team and healthy again. Now, there is a player on this list that I will say is a perfect part of a trade package involving Anfernee Simons, but I will get to him in a little bit. The next player who I want to talk about is a guy who's quietly been a top 12 center in the NBA this season, and that is Nic Claxton. Now, when we're talking about Nic Claxton, he is a guy who has shown a lot of linear development every single year he's been with the Brooklyn Nets. Claxton is an elite rim runner who's super coordinated and athletic for his height. And Claxton has really expanded his game in Brooklyn over these last couple of seasons. He's a very respectable playmaker. He's a great alley-oop threat, and he's a decent rebounder. He's currently averaging 13.5 points per game, almost 9 rebounds, and 5 assists per night. He has posted 2 triple-doubles this season, and overall I think the Nets could get a decent return for Claxton, a guy who I think is just a little bit out of their time frame for their rebuild window as an organization. I could see teams like Boston, Philly, maybe even Indiana trying to acquire Claxton and lock down that starting center position for them for the next few seasons. In general, I can see a lot of teams wanting to acquire a player like Nic Claxton as a consistent starting center who doesn't get hurt very often, is under contract for the next 2 years after this season, and just overall a guy who I think can really contribute to a winning basketball team. And the next 2 players who I'm going to group together have a similar reasoning behind like my Nic Claxton rationale of guys who are a little bit older and more of in their win now windows, who are on bad rebuilding teams that really don't have a ton of direction moving forwards, and that is Saddiq Bey and Jose Alvarado with the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, Bey is 26 and Alvarado is 27, and I would imagine their time in New Orleans is not to last much longer. Both of these guys have proven that they can be contributors in this modern NBA. Now, to start with Saddiq Bey, watching him play, you can tell he is mainly fitted to be a spark plug off the bench in this league. He's a great rotational guy, and I think a lot of teams could utilize him. In New Orleans, as of late, he's been given a lot of opportunity to prove his ability offensively and defensively. He has a great frame, standing at about 6'8", 215 pounds. He can defend multiple positions. He can show a lot of hot stretches. He's a good isolation scorer and is shooting about 35% from 3 this season. And when it comes to Jose Alvarado, he is an awesome guard to have come off your bench. He brings so much energy into the game of basketball. He's a fantastic on-ball defender. He's shooting 39% from 3 this season. And for both of these guys, it kind of just feels like their time is getting wasted out in New Orleans. So I would love to see these guys get targeted come the trade deadline, and I think they could both be very impactful on winning teams. I do think Jose Alvarado could be really good on the Celtics, who I mentioned earlier could be potentially shopping an Anfernee Simons trade. So I could see Jose Alvarado being a good piece to acquire looking long-term for that Celtics roster. And I would love to see Jose Alvarado play with Joe Mazzulla. It seems like just a perfect match made in heaven. But yeah, Saddiq Bey and Jose Alvarado, I could definitely see these guys being moved at some point this season. But anyways, moving on, the next player I want to talk about is a guy who I definitely could see being moved before the trade deadline, a guy who's been in trade talks for like the last 3 seasons, and that is Jonathan Kuminga. Now, Kuminga has essentially been scapegoated by this Warriors organization over the last couple of seasons, and the trade is inevitably going to happen at some point. After not being able to move on from him last year, the Warriors extended Kuminga on a friendly 2-year deal, and very early into the season already, he has been a pawn in trade talks, and it's finally boiling enough in Golden State to where something could be in the works very soon. Now, when it comes to Kuminga as a player, I am very indifferent as to how he can contribute on a winning team. He is a slashing forward that makes over $22 million a season, who doesn't really do a whole lot with the ball in his hands. Clearly, Steve Kerr is not a fan of Jonathan Kuminga. He doesn't really have a 3-point jump shot. His usage and efficiency are very low for a guy who's making $22 million a year. I don't even know what potential trades look like or what the Warriors could recoup from trading Kuminga. He's averaging 12.5 points, 6 rebounds, and almost 3 assists a night on around 26 minutes per game. He is on a team option, however, so essentially if he is traded, it would be treated as an expiring contract most likely. I have seen some rumors being floated floated around about him being traded to the Bulls, which, I mean, he kind of fits the mold for the Bulls, just a perfect play-in team. But yeah, Jonathan Kuminga, a guy who's been in trade talks since he's entered the league. I would say it's time for a new start for him and the Warriors. But anyways, moving on, the final player I want to talk about is not actually just one player. It is pick a name from the Sacramento Kings roster. Now the Kings are 6-19 and also the third oldest team in the NBA. So we can start with Domantas Sabonis and just kind of work our way down a little bit. So Domantas Sabonis, who probably has the highest value of anyone on this team. I could see a lot of teams wanting to bite. I've heard some rumors about the Hawks trying to acquire him potentially. He is a proven winner. He plays the game of basketball very well. Good playmaker for a big man. However, he is on a max contract, so that makes potential trades somewhat difficult. But I think Sabonis desperately needs to get out of Sacramento, needs to get out of this organization, needs a fresh new start. And then the next guy who has been in trade talks for a while as well is Zach LaVine, a guy who's making around $46 million a year. Now, he's been scapegoated for a while now by the Bulls and then the Kings organization. Yes, he is on an expensive contract and his production might not always match the money that he is making. However, Zach LaVine is damn near a 50, 40, 90 player. So I think he could be very impactful given the right fit. I personally think if Milwaukee does not want to move on from Giannis, I think Zach LaVine could be a last-ditch effort to kind of help that team offensively, being a co-star role to Giannis. But yeah, any potential Zach LaVine trades are going to be very interesting to see who would be willing to bite on LaVine. Then we'll move on to DeMar DeRozan, a guy who's only making about half of what a max contract player makes. He's a guy who I could see some teams buying on to be their sixth man or at least boost a team's offense down the stretch. He is 36 years old, and I do have some concerns whether his style of play even translates into winning basketball. However, it is DeMar DeRozan. I'm a huge fan of him. I would love to see him potentially get moved on to a winning roster, and I think it's an obvious decision that the Kings need to move on from DeRozan at this point. And then the last guy I'll touch on from this team is Russell Westbrook, who is actually having a really good season. He's averaging 14, 7, and 7 on 44% from the field and 37% from three. Most importantly, he is on a league minimum contract, so he can add leverage in trades with teams who are in a win now window. And I could genuinely see Brody helping a contending team out, especially coming off the bench for a good team. His energy at 37 years old is still just like unparalleled in the NBA. I love a lot of the things that he can contribute on the court. I think he is a winning player. I know he doesn't have a championship, but when you watch Russell Westbrook play, like there's just a different energy you feel. And I think just the leadership in general that he brings could be very valuable. Like I mentioned before, he is on a league minimum contract, so I think that makes it very flexible, and there's really no reason the Kings need to hold on to him moving forward. So I'd love to see Russ get moved on to a winning team before the season's over, just see him compete in the playoffs again. But with that, those are the few guys who I think personally should be moved very soon in the NBA. Make sure to let me know your guys' opinions in the comments. Who did I miss? Please consider subscribing if you like these kinds of videos. Make sure to drop a like on the video. And with that, that's all I have to say today. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.